What if I told you that things in America are actually getting safer? I know, it doesn't always feel that way. But today, I want to show you something that might challenge that automatic negative thought and maybe offer a little relief.
This just in, Dr. Sharma tells us there's good news. Violent crime has been plummeting across the United States. But how did this happen? Take it away, Doc.
I'm Dr. Sharma, physician, board-certified psychiatrist, and Air Force veteran. Today, we're digging into something that might surprise you: the steep decline in violent crime, especially homicides in the United States, over the last few years. Many veterans I work with describe hypervigilance in public, always scanning for threats and being on edge. It's an understandable instinct, especially with PTSD or anxiety. There's a reason why one of the questions on the PTSD questionnaire is whether the person feels like the world is inherently a dangerous place. But here's the key question: is the world truly as dangerous as our brains lead us to believe? If you found yourself thinking everything is getting worse, danger is everywhere, then this video is for you. And even if you're not a veteran, stick around. The facts we'll cover today might make you feel a little bit safer in your day-to-day life. First, let's talk about what's actually happening with crime in America. There's no sugarcoating it that 2020 was a bad year for violent crime. The pandemic shut down schools and community programs, social unrest was high, many police departments were pulling back. As a result, violent crime, including homicides, spiked in 2020. It stayed high for a couple of years after that. If you followed the news during that time, it genuinely felt like the country was becoming more dangerous. But here's the part you might not have heard. Over the last 2 years, something really interesting has been going on across the country. Violent crime started falling sharply. In fact, people are, in effect, taking each other's lives far less often now than before. By 2023, the national homicide rate had a record one-year drop, and it's kept dropping since. Today, America is much safer than it was a few years ago. Let's dive into the numbers. According to FBI data, murders fell by about 12% in 2023, the largest single-year drop ever recorded in federal crime stats, and 2024 continued that trend, with initial estimates showing about a double-digit decline around 14 to 16% lower than 2023. In fact, one crime analyst noted that 2025, this year, is on track to have the lowest murder rate since 1960, when national record-keeping actually began. Let that sink in. We may be living through one of the safest periods in modern American history in terms of violent crime. And this downward trend isn't isolated to one or two lucky places. It's widespread. Data shows that in 25 of the 30 U.S. cities with the most homicides, the number of homicides is down so far in 2025. Even in cities that historically struggled with violence, things are improving. Take Baltimore, where I live, a city that shows up in the headlines a lot for crime. In 2022, Baltimore's annual homicides fell to under 200 for the first time in over a decade. And then in the first 6 months of 2025, Baltimore recorded the fewest homicides in 5 decades. Emergency rooms in the city that were once constantly filled with gunshot victims have quieted down. This is a remarkable turnaround. The U.S. homicide rate since 1980 shows high peaks in the early 1990s and again in 2020, followed by a sharp decline in the most recent years, approaching historic lows. Of course, none of this is to say that crime is over or that tragedy can't strike. Even with recent improvements, there are still thousands of homicides each year, and certain communities still facing a lot of challenges. But the trend is undeniable. Overall, things are moving in a positive direction. So the question becomes why? Why are violent crimes and homicides falling so dramatically? Several factors seem to be behind the great American crime decline of the 2020s. Here are a few of the big reasons. 1, PostPandemic Stabilization. The stresses of 2020 have calmed down. Remember, during the pandemic lockdowns, schools were closed, youth programs stopped, and many at-risk young people had nothing to do and nowhere to go, which unfortunately led to more trouble on the streets. The pandemic also frayed at the community bonds and put everyone on edge, and after George Floyd, there was a collapse in trust between communities and police, leading to less proactive policing. That's what I was saying when I said they pulled back. Now that society has reopened, those pressures have relaxed. Schools and social services are back, and that alone created a natural break on violent crime as life returned to normal. In short, the fever of 2020 broke, and communities could breathe again. 2. Investments in violence prevention. In the last few years, huge investments were made to stop violence before it happens. The federal government, through the American Rescue Plan Act, sent billions of dollars to cities for public safety and community programs. Here in Baltimore and other places, that money built new recreation centers, improved lighting in high-crime areas, and it also funded local anti-violence initiatives. Millions of dollars into community violence interruption programs, which basically send trained outreach workers to mediate conflicts and mentor at-risk individuals. Cities have adopted strategies like focused deterrence, which means focusing on the small number of people most likely to shoot or to be shot, and not just policing them though, but offering things like job training, mental health support, community assistance, housing assistance. And this carrot and stick approach tries to pull young men out of cycles of violence by giving them alternatives before a crime happens. It's effectively a middle path. We finally realized that beating people over the head repeatedly, both figuratively and literally, does not stop violent crime. Yes, we have to have the threat of punishment, don't get me wrong, okay? But we also have to have the carrot, how the person will be rewarded for following the right path, and it seems to be working. Data from these programs show real declines in violence where they operate. 3. Smarter policing and community partnerships. Alongside community programs, law enforcement has adapted. After 2020, many police departments saw veteran officers retire or resign, and there was a big pullback in aggressive tactics. But since then, things have improved. They've stabilized. There's been more of a balanced approach. And there's also been a push for police to rebuild trust and work with communities. In some cities, rather than just flooding high crime areas with arrests, police are coordinating with community programs to target the worst violence drivers in the community while trying not to alienate the whole neighborhood. In Baltimore, for instance, the police commissioner admitted that the old approach of just arrest the bad guys wasn't enough without wraparound services to help those individuals change their course in life. So not punishment, but rehabilitation and redirection. Now, because of partnerships with groups like ROCA, which provides therapy, education, and job help to high-risk youth, law enforcement isn't going it alone, and it's leading to better results. Basically, a holistic approach where policing, community outreach, and social support all work together is actually making headway in reducing violence. And this is a win-win situation. Let me be clear. This makes for a safer environment for the citizens and law enforcement both, which is what we all want. Each of these factors has contributed to the downturn in violence. It's as if the tide that raised crime in 2020 is being countered with this community resilience and smart policies, pulling the violence back down across the country. That's great news. And it shows that human choices like funding programs, improving communities, changing policing strategies can actually make our world safer. But here's where we have to keep our leaders honest. Recently, there have been a lot of severe cuts to these programs. And let me be clear, these programs are evidence-based. They're psychologically minded, and they clearly work. And they keep us, the citizens, including veterans, and law enforcement safer all around. But the Justice Department this spring decided to cut $1 billion in violence reduction grants. They cut violence reduction programs. This hit a lot of these programs hard. There are also going to be ripple effects from federal cuts to Medicaid and food benefits. This in no way is about fraud, waste, or abuse. They cut programs that are actually making a difference. So even though we have a lot of good news, there is obviously still work to be done. We don't want all these positive changes to be reversed. And look, I couldn't care less what party you're in or which candidate you support. I'm going by the evidence. If I'm telling you this information and your knee-jerk reaction is to be against it because your party is against it, then you have to re-examine yourself because you might be experiencing cognitive dissonance. Just like medical opinions, I look at the evidence, and the evidence says that these programs work. Simple as that. Now, hearing all this, you might be thinking, okay, the data sounds great, but why don't I feel any safer? Even as crime rates fall, many people's anxiety remains high. This is true for the general public, and especially true for a lot of veterans that I talk to. Our brains have a way of latching onto potential dangers. It's a survival instinct that sometimes spirals, and society isn't exactly helping us relax. A recent Gallup poll in late 2024 found that 64% of Americans believed crime was rising compared to the year before, even though in reality, crime was dropping sharply at the same time. So why do we have such a pessimistic view? One big thing is psychologists call bad news bias. Violent crimes are thankfully rare events, but they get a lot of attention in the media, including social media. The old saying in news is, if it bleeds, it leads. So every homicide, every high-profile act of violence is broadcast into our lives via TV, short 30-second clips on social media. Meanwhile, the reality that violent crime is plummeting is not a headline because it doesn't keep eyes glued to the screen. Our brains are essentially being served a highlight reel of worst-case scenarios 24/7. So, of course, we're on edge. We form the impression that violence lurks everywhere, when actually we're often hearing about the same rare events over and over again. As journalist Brian Walsh put it, crime is a prime example of bad news bias. Our attention is grabbed by the worst stories, and if we fail to adjust to what is actually happening around us, meaning the evidence, not just what we think is happening, it makes us think our cities are more dangerous than they really are. This is a big reason why I wanted to make this video, because this good news deserves attention. For veterans, there's an extra layer. After military service, deployments, certain MOSs like law enforcement, fire, and many other reasons, many of us are conditioned to be alert for threats at all times. Crowded spaces can trigger that old instinct that something bad is about to go down. This hypervigilance is a hallmark of PTSD and anxiety disorders. Your mind jumps to worst-case scenarios. What if there's an active shooter? What if I get mugged? It's a form of mental self-defense, but it can overshoot reality. When you're always in alert mode, it's hard to notice that most trips to the grocery store or walks in the park are completely uneventful and safe. So if you've been feeling this way, constantly keyed up, assuming danger is imminent, it's not because you're crazy. It's because your brain is doing its job too well, and because we're all swimming in a sea of alarming news. The good news is we can push back against those thoughts with solid facts. This video isn't just some kind of academic exercise. It's a way to arm ourselves with accurate information to fight those anxious instincts. When the thought pops up, it's not safe out there, the world's going to hell, you can remind yourself, actually, crime is significantly down, and we are safer today than we've been in a long time. That doesn't mean bad things don't happen, okay? I'm not saying you should walk out the door, leave it unlocked, walk around with your wallet open, okay? It just means the violent crimes are the exception, not the norm. Sometimes our brains need proof that it's okay to let our guard down just a little bit. And of course, let's balance the optimism with realism. None of this is to deny that crime still exists or that certain communities are hurting. We absolutely should stay aware of our surroundings and take sensible precautions, the situational awareness that a lot of us veterans stick to. And the recent progress we've seen is not guaranteed to continue without effort. But the key takeaway here is hope. The next time your mind jumps to that dark place, try to think back to the facts we discussed. America in 2025 is, by the numbers, one of the safest times to be alive in our country. Far fewer people are being unalived or assaulted today compared to a few years ago. Our collective efforts from community activists, policymakers, everyday people looking out for their neighbors are making a difference. That's something to be proud of and something that should hopefully let you breathe a little easier. For my fellow veterans, you don't have to live every day as if you're back on the battlefield. I know that mindset can be hard to shake, but give yourself permission to notice the peace around you. It's more prevalent than your brain might think. Let me know your thoughts on this topic in the comments. As always, I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about this good news? Is it reassuring in some way? Or do you not believe it and you think I'm making it up just to make you feel better? By the way, I'm not. Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, you might like the episode I did on veteran inventors who changed the world. Click over here to check it out. Also, click over here to subscribe if you haven't already done so. As always, thanks for watching. Dr. Sharma signing off. See you next time.